This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello and welcome to the Glazov gang. This is courtesy of Daniel Greenfield's Traffic Jam, a Robert Spencer moment, which means that I will be discussing a salient issue for the next 10 minutes. Tonight, I thought that it would be important to discuss House Resolution 569, which condemns, and I quote, violence, bigotry, and hateful rhetoric toward Muslims in the United States. This is a resolution that has been sponsored by some of the leading lights among the left in the House, including Eleanor Holmes Norton, Keith Ellison, and Andre Carson, Loretta Sanchez, Charles Rangel, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Judy Chu, and many others. And what's noteworthy about it is that it is calling for an end to bigotry and hateful rhetoric, as well as to violence against Muslims. Now, nobody supports violence against any innocent people, Muslims or non-Muslims. The inclusion of bigotry and hateful rhetoric in with the violence, however, is a most ominous aspect of this resolution, because it takes something that's undeniably evil, violence against innocent Muslims, and lumps it together with things that are based on subjective judgments. One man's bigotry and one man's hateful rhetoric is another man's honest but unpopular speech about the motives and goals of the jihad terrorists. And this is why this resolution is so dangerous. Now, I must add at this point that many people have noted, well, there's no criminal penalty involved here. It isn't as if they're saying if you engage in hateful rhetoric against Muslims that you will then be sent to jail or something of that kind. And so really this is nothing to be concerned about. But to say such a thing is to fail to understand what the overall agenda is here. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is constituted by 56 Muslim governments plus the Palestinian Authority, the largest voting bloc in the United Nations today, has been for years trying to compel the Western states that generally adhere to the freedom of speech to criminalize the criticism of Islam, to, under the guise of forbidding so-called religious hatred, to foreclose upon even honest discussion of how Islamic jihadis use the texts and teachings of Islam to justify violence and supremacism and hatred, and to make recruits among peaceful Muslims. This resolution is in accord with that overall agenda. Now, it does not hold any penalties, but the idea is to keep coming back with this year after year, as the OIC has done in the United Nations, year after year, finding new formulations, finding ways to overcome the objections of various member states, and moving toward the day when they're able to pass a form of the resolution that is acceptable to large numbers of nations in the UN, as well as including, that is, Western nations. Now, the idea is the same here, that over time, if this kind of thing continues to be introduced into the House and discussed in the House, it's just a resolution, yes, it contains no penalties, yes, but once you start to pass this kind of thing and make acceptable the idea that the House of Representatives of the government that has a First Amendment that says that there should be no infringing upon the freedom of speech can actually pass a resolution that says that there should be restrictions, that they condemn hateful rhetoric, is simply to open the door to and ask for the next step, which would be to create some penalties for this kind of speech. Now, mind you, this resolution has not been passed, but it's not out of the question that it could be passed in the future. It's been referred to the House Committee on the Judiciary. We can hope that if there are some sane constitutionalists on the House Committee on the Judiciary, that they will recognize the danger of condemning any kind of rhetoric, whether it's characterized as hateful or loving or anything else, that for the United States government to get into the position of doing that is to lead to infringements upon the First Amendment. And that is why this bill, this resolution, is so insidious. Now, also, there is the recent statement made by the wife of the Paris jihad murderer Sami Amimour, one of the jihadis who murdered 130 people in Paris in November. And she was very happy about the attack, and in a statement that recently came out, she said, as long as you continue to offend Islam and Muslims, you will be potential targets. Not just Copts and Jews, but everyone. Now, see, the implication here is that if we do what this resolution wants and cut out the so-called bigotry and hateful rhetoric, then we will no longer be potential targets, unless, of course, we are Copts or Jews. And so if we just stop being Copts and stop being Jews and stop giving out this so-called hateful rhetoric, then there will be no more jihad terror and everything will be okay. And so there you have it. The problem is there are some people who don't want to stop being Copts. There are many people who don't want to and cannot stop being Jews. And there are also very many people who don't want to have restrictions on their speech placed upon them by people who characterize their speech falsely, in their view, as hateful. And in point of fact, that is indeed the problem that we face with this kind of resolution. For example, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Hamas-linked Muslim Brotherhood front group that has so much influence in the American media and some considerable influence among American law enforcement and government agencies, they have for years been stigmatizing any honest discussion of the jihad ideology as being hateful and bigoted. And the obvious agenda that they have is to restrict any discussion of the jihad ideology so that anything that is an honest exploration of how jihadis use the Quran and use the example of Muhammad to make recruits and to justify their actions would be out of the question. And that would mean that we would instead have no idea of the motives and goals of the jihadis, and they would be able, therefore, to advance unimpeded and unopposed. That is what is the ultimate end goal of something like House Resolution 569. It is to ban, under the rubric of so-called hateful rhetoric, any discussion of the jihad doctrine and the beliefs, the motives, and the goals of jihad terrorists. People might say, no, this is hysterical, it's hard to believe, but after you've been called hateful for so many years as I have, simply for exploring how the Quran and Sunnah are used by Islamic jihadis, well, it doesn't seem implausible at all based on my experience, and I think that any neutral and judicious observer will see ultimately that this is indeed the case. So I would hope that everybody who understands the importance of the First Amendment and understands the threat to the First Amendment that this resolution poses will not see it just as some sort of benign and symbolic gesture of solidarity with embattled Muslims in the United States, but sees it as the real threat to the freedom of speech that it is. And so this has been the Glazov gang, the Robert Spencer moment, and Jamie wanted me to make sure to tell you that you need to go to the Glazov, jamieglazov.com to support the show, and that I wholeheartedly endorse that and am not being forced to say it. And also to subscribe to the Glazov Gang's YouTube channel. And so now that we have these things, these very important housekeeping details cleared away, Jamie did want me to emphasize that I'm not saying that under duress and that I do support his work. And so you can take that to the bank. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.